Good, good. How was your spring break? Okay, cool. My spring break was pretty good. I spent some time with friends and family. Carrie, how was yours?
It was good, actually. I took some days off work. I don't normally do that, so that was fun. Opportunity to see some friends. Went to St. Augustine, which is a really cool city. I don't know if you guys have never been there before. You should check it out. It has some great, yummy food. So it was a really good break. But we do have some things to tell you about this week. We are back from spring break, which means we're halfway through the semester, which is crazy to believe. But let's check out some things that are going on this week. Tonight we have some games. So our baseball team will play against Lawrence Tech at 6 p.m. Any baseball players in here? Whoop, whoop.
Whoop, whoop.
Whoop.
All
Y'all
right.
ready? Hopefully you guys wake up by then. And then we also have our men's volleyball team playing against Limestone at 7 p.m. So make sure y'all check those out. A great way to support your Royals.
Yes, make sure you guys go and support them. All right, so we have some spiritual growth credit opportunities this week and today. We have Lifelines in Rains Hall at 8 p.m., ladies, so make sure that you're there. On Wednesday, which is tomorrow, Inroads, dinner's at 8:30, and then worship's at 9. Just remember that it's worth one spiritual growth credit. Also, Friday, we have laser tag at the PLRC at 7. We also have the escape room on Thursday. It's going to be at 6 p.m. in the PLRC. I have to recognize the women's volleyball team and the men's basketball team. They'll be willing to help the Special Olympics at the All Saint Academy in Winter Haven on March 14th. If you're interested, please come to Student Life and sign up and make sure that you guys have that opportunity.
Yeah, it's such a neat opportunity. We appreciate both those teams willing to serve in that capacity. So make sure you check that out. Those could be a great opportunity for you to serve alongside those teams. So as you guys have noticed, this week is a little bit differently as it's our Breakout Chapel week where we have 3 different sessions going on at the same time. So say hello to our Ratzliff and Darby friends. We are glad that you guys also checked out one of those opportunities. And so Thursday will be the same setup. So I want to just inform you what those choices are that you have so you can go ahead and decide if you want. So here in the CMC, we will have a story of a gentleman who will share his story from drug trafficking to prison to redemption. So that will be a really neat story. If you want to check that out, it'll be in here. In Ratzliff, we have Dr. Sean Craig Miles, and he will has the topic of can people change? Can they change? So that is another option. And then the third option with Robert Kovacs in Darby, it's finding peace in the midst of chaos. So make sure whichever one interests you the most, check that on Thursday. At this time, we want to go ahead and pause so our simulcast locations can go ahead and set up for those sessions.
Okay, so today here in this chapel, I want to welcome you. We have the organizer of human trafficking. It was Harleen Harwood and Justin Sharpless. So, human trafficking is the selling of women, men, and children in the forced of labor sexual slavery. Millions of people are trafficked every year, even in the United States. Even Florida currently ranks at 3rd in the human trafficking cases in America. Speakers from organizations such as One More Child and Epic Effect cases are in America. This is as well as Professor Ty Bimbo will be sharing the knowledge and experience with the topic as well as how to join and fight against the modern day slavery.
So this morning will be a really interesting time together. I encourage you to lean in and to learn. But before we do that, I'm going to pray, and then we're going to have our special guest come join us on stage. Let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you so much for bringing us back safely from spring break, Lord, and just thank you for the opportunity to really dive into this topic, Lord, and may we just lean in and learn from the guests that we have with us this morning, Lord, and we know that you are the author and the finisher of life, Lord, and that you delight in who you've designed us to be, Lord. And so may we just continue to walk in the calling that you've placed on our lives, and may we even know you deeper in our time together this morning. In your name, amen.
Amen.
As they come, will you guys welcome them to the stage?
Awesome. Thank you, Carrie. Before we get started, I just want to say throughout this panel, if you have any questions that you want asked to the panel, Professor Harwood is down here. You can just come up to her, and then she has note cards. So if you want to fill out a question, you can just submit them to her. And then when we're done with our are questions that we already have prescribed, then I'm going to take those questions from her and ask. So if any time throughout the panel discussion today you have a question, feel free to get up and come see her, okay? She'll be right up here in the front corner. All right? Excellent. So today's topic is on human trafficking, and we have three individuals here that took time out of their schedules, and we appreciate them for coming here. I'm going to ask the first question. I'm going to ask each one of you to introduce yourself, tell us what your current role is and what you're doing with your life, and then also what experiences have you had with either victims of human trafficking or organizations that have experiences with victims of human trafficking, and it's in any order you'd like.
Hi, can they hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Hi, I'm Ashley Taylor. So I am the anti-trafficking coordinator at One More Child in Lakeland. So a little bit of what we do is we just love on victims of sex trafficking, specifically in the state of Florida. I do all the fun paperwork and the computer stuff for our program, so it's a lot of fun. But some experiences that our particular program has with organizations that support human trafficking victims in Florida is actually through the sheriff department. That's just one that comes to mind. We get to do stings with them periodically, and they kind of let us love on those victims when they pull them from the sting and get them the help that they need so they don't have to go to jail, go to rehab or things like that. And in that way we get to intercept, and we're really grateful for that opportunity. So.
Hello. Are y'all awake? I know y'all just got back from spring break, so thanks for being here. My name's Megan Maxwell, and I work for a nonprofit called Epic Effect, who is partners with Highland Ag Solutions. So right now I've been doing some research and laying the foundation to work with advocating for farmers who are treating their workers well, and raising awareness for human trafficking in the labor sector. But I also lived in Honduras for 9 months and was a house mom for 28 girls from the ages of 5 to 18. And all of those girls had either been orphaned, neglected, severely sexually abused, and or human trafficked. So I've been able to have hands-on experience with what it looks like to see God transform lives and heal hearts, including mine. So that's a little bit about where I'm from.
Ty Benbow, I'm a professor here, so y'all know me. The reason that I've gotten sort of into the human trafficking issue was actually my prior occupation when I was in Kansas. When I was a minister in the church I was at in Wichita, we ended up partnering really closely with an organization in Wichita that covers specifically sex trafficking. And just through that partnership, it became something I became passionate about. And so I actually think this is an important point. It's not like I just woke up one day inherently passionate about trafficking. I caught it from someone else who was already passionate about it. And I think that's what's really important is you know, unless you've experienced it personally, it typically comes from someone else. And after I was hit with it, I didn't feel like I really had a choice to be passive about it. So that's my exposure.
Excellent. So our next questions are, so just to kind of start the conversation, what is human trafficking, and what are the different types of human trafficking? And any of you can answer these.
Do you want to answer? Okay, you can answer.
And also, it doesn't just have to be one person.
Okay.
Multiple people can chime in. Okay.
So I can talk about sex trafficking, since that's what we typically see for our organization. So we deal with sex trafficking victims of both male and female children and adults. So what we have seen as human trafficking, because there's all different types, like as many as you can count. There's probably more. So we just address sex trafficking. And so what we see for human sex trafficking is anytime a child is exploited sexually, that's human trafficking. So whether they're selling a picture of themselves on Instagram and someone's passing it around school, that's trafficking, because someone is benefiting from what they're doing. But say for adults, male or female, Human sex trafficking is any time someone is forced, whether through fraud or coercion, to sell themselves for sex, and that it doesn't have to always be money. It can be any type of exchange. So if there is one person who is benefiting from what they're doing, that's also trafficking as well. And there's a bunch of different federal definitions that you can Google as well, provided by the Homeland Security. But that is what we deal with, so that's sex trafficking.
And to piggyback off of that, I think a lot of people think about the extremes of sex trafficking, which are a reality of like children and adults getting abducted and being sold and videoed for pornography and all these things. But there's also cases where it's children's families that are selling them. And so it's not black and white. It gets really messy really quick. Yeah. I work more now with labor trafficking. So what that is people being forced against their will to work for no pay, or for an exchange, or they're having something held over their head, like they're being threatened, if they don't do this, I'll kill your sister, or whatever. Like there's some sort of manipulative undertide to what's going on, and they're being forced to work when they didn't choose to. So, that makes sense. Okay.
Excellent. We'll go to our next question. How prevalent is human trafficking in Florida, the U.S., and worldwide?
I can talk about what we see for sex trafficking. As it was said before, Florida is the third worst state for human trafficking reports in the entire nation. The only other states that beat us are California and Texas. And if you think about that, that's pretty insane, because think of how huge geographically California and Texas are compared to tiny little Florida, this little peninsula way down here. So it's very prevalent here. It's in all counties. I would venture to say all cities or towns maybe have experienced that at some point in time. So it's pretty insane. I don't know if y'all have anything.
The last statistic I saw on worldwide was there's 27 million men, women, and children that are currently in slavery of some sort worldwide, which is kind of mind-boggling. But that was a few years ago, so I don't know if that's gotten better or worse, but that's about where it is.
And so on top of that, there's a few things I just want to make sure that we're understanding, because this spider webs very quickly. It's not an accident that the top 3 states in our country that are dealing with trafficking are border states. And so this isn't just a singular issue. This very quickly metastasizes into other issues. And so even if we're speaking on issues of immigration or different political matters, this all supports, like, how are people even getting to the border to try to pursue a different life here in America? More often than not, it's happening by means of trafficking. So the way people are even getting to our borders informs how we need to understand trafficking. That's why Florida, California, and Texas are the states that are dealing with this the most, because the people trying to get into the country are already victims of sex trafficking or labor trafficking before they even get here. And so this is a pretty big deal. The other thing I would mention quickly is the reason why we need to have a state, nationwide, and international understanding of this is because I hope every time you tune in for something really significant on the television, you understand that this also informs how trafficking works. Sex trafficking specifically for like the Super Bowl or the Olympics or the World Cup, wherever an event of magnitude is occurring, I promise you there are women that are getting, and men to a degree, are being brought into that city just specifically for the engagement of sex during a massive influx of population in those cities. And so this is something to keep in mind whenever a city is hosting a Super Bowl or any other major sporting event. This is guaranteed to happen. These poor women and children and men get moved to wherever the event is, only for the event, only to be picked up and moved again somewhere else. And so this is mobile, and it's complicated.
Okay, our next question. How do people become trafficked, or how do they get involved in being trafficked? And then also, along with that, who is at risk of being trafficked? Maybe who are the more vulnerable populations? I know you guys already mentioned that it's men, women, and children. But who would you say are the most vulnerable populations, and how are they getting trafficked?
Traffickers are really good at knowing who their prey are, at seeing who is vulnerable. They look for, when it comes to teens and adolescents and younger, they look for the ones who are rebellious, the ones that are kind of outcasts, the runaways. They look for people who are looking for belonging. And a lot of times they'll hook them nicely. They'll say, hey, like, let me grab you an ice cream. And they'll build a relationship with them. Or they'll look for them online and they'll build a relationship with them and convince them to meet up. And so they think they have this rapport with this person, and then they don't. So that's my experience with adolescents, if you want to talk more to that.
Yeah, I would say we see a lot of the same things. The Romeo style is what we call it. But a lot of what we see is with children or adults who have gone through trauma. So maybe they've probably seen their parents do drug abuse. Maybe they are addicted themselves from a very young age. They've probably been sexually abused throughout their entire life, neglected, homeless. And so we call these vulnerabilities. All these things happened to them as a child, right, that they had no control of. And then by the time that, say, a Romeo or a boyfriend comes along, and sometimes they're women too, we're seeing female traffickers recruit as well, and they say, oh, your mom hates you, or she hits you, or you get neglected. Okay, come with me. I'll get you that ice cream. You can come live with me. We'll go down the road. I've got a place down there. I'll take care of you. Life is going to be great. And so by the time that they come and say go living with their trafficker, it's too late. They're trapped in that situation, especially if they're a child. I mean, they have no control over that. So that's a lot of what we see is all these awful traumatic things have happened to them, and then when they come to the point where they start getting trafficked, that's definitely not the first time that something terrible has happened to them, and all these vulnerabilities led up to that. So say if someone came up to them and said, hey, you're kind of quiet in the corner, let me talk to you, let me care about you, or say someone in class. So if they had just had someone see them and extract them from that situation and meet a need, like say, here's food, they may not even be in that situation or susceptible to being trafficked from a trafficker. So.
And so I hope what we're gathering from this is that it's kind of nixing the misconception that Liam Neeson's daughter travels to France and gets snatched, right? Like that's really not what this looks like. More often than not, it's this slow fade into it because they're susceptible. And this Romeo that we're describing is typically someone who, it's not like they immediately put them into the worst type of trafficking you can imagine. They slowly integrate them into it to where they wake up one day and they're like, what happened? But it took 2 years, right? And it took place through a relationship. We'll probably get back to that, the messiness of those relationships, I'd imagine, later, because that's what makes it hard to get out. But the other thing I want to mention too, and I don't want to sound like a beaten drum, but that this is another side of it, is that another person who's targeted is anyone who's displaced. And so this isn't much a domestic issue, but trafficking on the international scale, it's someone who is no longer living where they typically lived, and they're trying to find opportunity elsewhere. So this happens a lot with people who are from like Saharan Africa or the Middle East, and they're trying to get into mainland Europe, trying to secure a job as a maid or a nanny or an au pair or any job like this. And so they answer an advertisement for, hey, we're looking for people to clean houses, or we're looking for people to do this. And the next thing you know, they're not actually cleaning houses. They're doing something entirely different. Or they are cleaning houses, but it's a ruse for the other thing they're doing. And so displacement's also, especially on an international scale, another really big issue when it comes to trafficking.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. It's not the Taken movie that you see very rarely. So the next question is, what are some common misconceptions about human trafficking? I mean, we just talked about one, right? But what are some other common ones?
That it's kind of like what I said earlier, that it's always how do I say this? Like it can be their family. It can be a guy that looks absolutely normal. I think a lot of times we slap on a stereotype in our mind from movies or books of what a trafficker looks like. But it could look like me. Like you don't know who when, where, or how. So it's why you gotta constantly keep your eyes open for abnormalities, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later too, of like signs of something not being right or something being a little off. And don't be afraid to question people. That's been my biggest thing through the process, is like some of these people that I've known and loved were actually entwined into this human trafficking net, and I would have never imagined someone like that being a part of it. So yeah, I think just don't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. What we see, the traffickers a lot of times can also be parents, and they're most of the time someone that is a trusted family friend. So it's not always taken. That's less than 1% of the cases that we see. So it's definitely someone that already has a relationship with that person. For sex trafficking, I don't know as much for labor, but that's what we typically see.
And you're not going to like this one, but it's necessary to bring up. The number one misconception with trafficking, and this is going to sting for too many people in the room than I'd like to imagine, but at the end of the day, the top misconception with trafficking is that porn is harmless, because it's not. Pornography is directly tied to sex trafficking. And so if you think you're just watching something and it's just what I'm watching and it's not a big deal, you are literally taking part in the process of sex trafficking, because if those videos aren't getting hits, then people wouldn't be putting women in the shots. And so porn viewership is not harmless, because you're actually adding fuel to the sex trafficking fire, which is, again, why it's such a dire thing.
I can give you a real life example of that. So one of the girls that I worked with in Honduras was sold by her family to a man who was going to take care of her, because they're a really poor family. And he ended up, she was 9, almost 10 at the time, and he ended up selling her for sex to whoever wanted her. And day in and day out, she was having to perform these acts for these men as a 10-year-old. And they would videotape it, and they made unbelievable amounts of money on her. They even went so far as to shave down her teeth so she would be better at doing oral things. So when she came to us, she was absolutely broken. She was 12 years old and pregnant. And she's completely different now, thanks to God, and she's unbelievable. But going off of that, like I think sometimes shame is not of God, right? But I do believe that conviction is. And sometimes we think that what we're doing on our own isn't going to hurt anybody, but in the sense of porn, it's hurting you more than you think it is, and it's hurting your future spouse more than you think it is, and it's hurting a world more than you think it is. And I've seen the girls who've had to have reconstructive surgery because of the few people who go too far. So there's that.
Can I add to that? Absolutely. Okay. I definitely agree, in a complete agreement with the points that you have brought up. I would also like to add that we see pornography as a teaching and training tool a lot for the child and male and female sex trafficking victims that we encounter. It's definitely a training tool, because that's what the buyers want. So they are forced to watch pornography so that they know what is expected of them, because sometimes when, say, someone who's addicted to porn, they have watched it so many times, it's not enough anymore, so they want to go out and actually engage in whatever act it was that they saw on their computer screen at home. And so it's so much of a pattern that these kids and these women and these children are being forced to watch porn so that they know what is expected of them. So, and we feel like pornography is trafficking. Like, there is no pornography and then it could lead to trafficking, maybe. Like, no, it is definitely related, it is definitely equivalent. I mean, it could even be labor trafficking, because they're not getting paid for what they're doing. They might make money, but they're not getting paid for what is being taken away from them. So it's I'm so glad that this is starting to be talked about more and more and associated with human trafficking, because it's not necessarily something that we could have talked about maybe even 5 years ago. So, but yeah.
And one more thing is that 1 in 4 victims of human trafficking are male. And a lot of them are between the ages of, correct me if I'm wrong, but last time I looked up was 7 and 14. So just keep that in mind as well.
Are we good? Excellent. I like the dialogue, so it's okay. Don't feel like you need to apologize or anything. One other thing I would like to point out, another misconception, is that the people who are being trafficked necessarily want to get out of it in that immediate time. I know I've talked to some people that they're actually, when they were rescued out of trafficking, they were upset about it. But that's part of this whole grooming process they're talking about, this Romeo personality. They feel like that person loves them. And so it's almost, it's like having a boyfriend to them, like you said. So that's just another point I wanted to bring up. But our next question is, what are the signs of human trafficking? So when you see somebody, what are the signs that they're being trafficked?
I can speak to that for us. It's someone maybe who doesn't know where they are. They don't have their documents on them. Maybe someone, what we see is a young girl or a young boy and a much older person, whether it's male or female, and they seem to have control over, say, what they say. Maybe they answer questions for them, things like that. I don't know if you have further.
I think just pay attention. And I know that sounds so cliche, but it's not going to be black and white. There's not going to be like this, and they're being trafficked. But I know that for me, like truck stops are a huge one. So a lot of these people are literally being transported in semis. I-4 is a hot spot. I think the statistic is like every time you're on I-4 for more than 30 minutes, you've passed 2 trucks that have people in them. And I don't know if that's still true, but as of, I think that was 4 years ago, like that was. And that's kind of crazy because it's in our backyard, right? We don't think about it. We don't think to look because who would look? But in truck stops and stuff, they've started to raise awareness for other truck drivers because that's where they'll go to the bathroom, or they'll run into the gas station, but they're usually disoriented. They're usually very timid. They're not allowed to talk to anyone. They're usually with someone. So just those types of things. Even if you have a question, like call the cops and say, this is the tag plate, this is where they are. Can you just pull them over and check, like just so I can sleep well tonight? Because you never know. And then another thing too, I had a friend the other day who was on a flight, and she saw a girl who did not speak English, and she was trembling, and she was next to. So my friend was sitting behind her, and it was a man, and this girl was right here. And you could tell that he was just very like domineering and that they didn't really have a relationship. And so my friend actually spoke Spanish, and so she wrote a note and said, "Are you okay?" and slid it behind the chair and gave it to her. And she wrote back, "No, I need help." And then by the time they landed, the cops were there to arrest that man, and she was saved from sex trafficking. So it was just because some woman had a gut feeling and said, you know what, I'm going to ask, because the worst thing she could say is no, and then we go on our way, and I can sleep all tonight. But don't ever be afraid to ask, even if you might offend somebody. So. What's up?
I don't have anything.
The only other thing I'll add, because that was fantastic, is when we're talking about what this looks like, you guys are in college now and at Warner, so I would presume that this is very unlikely to happen here. I really hope. But if you have siblings who are still in high school, women especially, definitely keep an eye out for any girlfriends who start catching the eye of an older guy, okay? So if he's in his 20s or 30s and he's like hanging out around the school, that is no good. He might not be a trafficker, but he could be. That's the prime age. High school girls is like ground zero for this. And so if you've got a younger sister, her and her friends have got to keep an eye out for a girl in their friend group or a girl in the school who is getting sort of just zeroed in on by some sketchy dude who is much older than they are, because that does happen, and they could be hanging out near the school. And so that's kind of one of the, that's like the low-hanging fruit, but that's an obvious one that might actually affect your life.
All right, our next question. What does one do if they suspect trafficking is occurring?
It's kind of what I just said, is just say something. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to call. And if you don't know who to call the cops. Like, that's what so many people are like, I don't know the hotline. I'm like, well, you can Google it, or you can just call 911. Just do something. Because I would much rather say something and be wrong than not say something and be right, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. If you have that gut feeling, or if you're just kind of like, I mean, it's true. If you're even getting your nails done, and it just feels off. We've had instances of where this has happened. You can totally call the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And if you go to polarisproject.org, it's right at the top. You can call them, give them as much information as you have, and they will literally take it from there. So they contact local law enforcement, they investigate it. Maybe you're the 20th call that they've had in the past 6 months from that nail salon or associated with that business. And maybe your 20th call is the call that finally law enforcement said, okay, we have enough evidence, we have enough speculation, we can actually go and investigate now. And so don't, to piggyback what she said, if you feel something is off or it doesn't look right, and maybe if you don't feel comfortable asking questions or approaching them, definitely call the hotline. If it's a child, you can also call the DCF abuse hotline. So all you have to do is make the call, or even they have a text line, you can text them, and they take it from there. So you don't have to, pull all this information or investigate yourself. Don't follow them. You don't have to go Liam Neeson on them. You can just call the hotline, and that's literally enough. So.
All right. Do we have another question? Yes. Okay. Discuss the organization you represent and how you are involved in the fight against human trafficking, or maybe an organization that you were a part of.
So for us, I'm with One More Child. So what we do for human trafficking is we deal just with sex trafficking victims. So we have over 100 clients that we provide services to. We have a safe home for them, for teenage girls, just doing life, normal teenage stuff like Netflix, school, chilling, all those things. And we provide therapy to them. We take them to doctor's appointments, like literally just doing life. And then we have another part of our program that is a mobile crisis unit. So they go to the victims wherever they're at, whether we have some that are living in a tent in a forest, or we have some that are living with their trafficker. Maybe they're in jail, maybe they're in a foster home, things like that. And so we go to them, providing therapy. We have survivor mentors who were sex trafficked themselves, who have since come out of the life, gotten a lot of healing, and are pouring their life skills back into these male and female victims of trafficking. So that's kind of our niche. I don't know
For sex trafficking was my time in Honduras, and I still volunteer with A21 and Propel Women and stuff like that. But now I work for Epic Effect, which is under Highland Ag Solutions. My parents, Steve and Beverly Maxwell, are really passionate about people and expanding the kingdom and doing things that the Bible just says to do. So that's protect the defenseless. And so Epic Effect advocates for farmers across America, but right now I'm doing research on how to best advocate the farmers who are doing everything correctly and treating their workers well, and then also raising awareness for some of the farmers who aren't even aware of what's going on. And so I'm more on the labor side now. So.
I don't work directly in it, But my exposure to this and what really got me into it is an organization that still exists in the city of Wichita, Kansas. It's called ICTSOS, and they primarily work on the I-35 corridor connecting Dallas to Kansas City. And they are straight up pulling people out of trafficking. So they're on the front line, and it's a really great organization. And I believe the missions pastor at the church I left has more of an international scope of this. He works primarily through an organization in Berlin, which is also a hotbed for all of this. And so I think this is really important for you all to hear. I got into this because my church got into it. And so this is one of those things where, again, I think I mentioned this at the top. I got caught up in it because other people got caught up in it. And I don't do it as a full-time profession. That would be amazing. But this is just something on top of, like your parents, it's just a gospel call. That's really all it is, on top of the work we're already doing.
Excellent. How can we help combat human trafficking and raise awareness of this important issue? So how can these students sitting out here in the audience help to combat this issue? I mean, other than we've already mentioned, just say something, but what things can they go out and do, like tangible things?
I've got 3 things, and then I'll pass it along to you. Social media, use it. You already use it. Use it for this. Be loud about it. Be obnoxious about it. Also, give your money to these organizations. Literally, be monetarily generous. All right. All you got to do is Google trafficking ministries. You will find local ones, regionals, national ones, international ones. Give your physical money to this stuff. And last but not least, on top of using your social media for this, and on top of giving your money, if your church is not already passionate about this, bother your pastor until they are. Those would be the 3 that I have.
I would say for us, come together as a group and adopt a project. So I'm sure maybe it's similar for your organization, but for us, we've had groups that have come together and said, hey, we know you guys serve a lot of survivors. What can we do? And we say, oh, can you put together comfort kits? We just had a group put together Valentine's Day bags. Or we have birthdays all the time. They always sneak up on us. It's always a surprise, and sometimes we're scrambling to put together a birthday gift. And so if you guys come together as a group and pitch all your money in and say, hey, we want to give you guys 20 birthday bags with little presents and stuff in it, here you go. So those are really easy, tangible things that you can do in between running errands and all of your commitments. And just drop them off at our office in Lakeland. So just things like that, like literally whatever you're passionate about and you feel like you want to do and give, you can come together as a group and do that, and we'll totally be game for that. So that's for it.
My question would be, what is your talent? What is your wheelhouse? Because some people are like, I'll volunteer to go do talks like this and talk about it and raise awareness, and some people are like, I want to be a wallflower and I don't want anyone to see me. But both people are needed. I think there's people who can go and volunteer for these organizations like One More Child and speak and raise awareness, but there's also people who can go in and cook meals once a month for the survivors, or just go in, and if you don't have money, just build relationships with these people. Because I think at the end of the day, we need to forget about the numbers and remember what's right in front of us, and take the talents that God gave us and say, okay, how can I creatively use this to pour life back into these broken bones? If that makes sense.
Excellent. All right, so do we have any submitted questions? Sure, yeah, come on up. Yeah, we have a question right here.
Not actually a question, it's a statement. But since we were talking about what can Warner do to help in this issue, can you flip to the next slide real quick? Okay. So we do have information here from One More Child out in the lobby, but also I and Maria Reinhardt, who's over there, she checked you in this morning. We have been trying to start an organization called Project Freedom. a couple of things that we have done. We did a 5K in November up in Winter Park, somewhere in that area. And we have also did a stocking stuffer drive. So you may have seen that, where we collected things like nail polish, shaving kits, journals, and let these people have, some sort of a normal Christmas. So we're also planning on some other events in the spring, but we really need student involvement. We really want to cater to the students here. Also, Dr. Steen, I don't know if she's in the room, she has a social work club. She is in the social work department. If you are interested in the social work major or joining that group, I know they have helped with the mission in Winter Haven. They've done a food drive. They're doing an event coming up soon, but I know that they are interested in human trafficking, so I'm hoping that we can partner with them as well.
Thank you. So there's some ways at Warner you can get involved. And so with that, is there any final comments that you want to share with the audience here? We have about 5 more minutes.
I know that this is heavy and it's like hard to talk about. So every time people ask me about Honduras and they're like, "What'd you do?" and I tell them and it just like deflates them immediately. I'm like, "No, but you don't understand. God is so good. Like there's so much hope for these people. Yes, this world is dark and there's evil in it, but there's also good, and y'all are the good. Y'all are the only thing standing between this world being completely consumed by evil." And so I'm just so thankful for you for being here, even if you didn't know what you were signing up for. Like, I think God has you here on purpose. And so thank you for being here, and thank you for being a light.
Yes, so be encouraged. I definitely agree with everything that you just said. I mean, I have no experience in working with human trafficking. I was never trafficked, but yet God has placed me in this work, sitting me at a computer doing this work, and it's totally unexpected, but God has given you everything that you need to have to, if this is your calling to work in this field, you already have everything you already need. I didn't think I did, but God was like, haha, you do. And I'm going to grow you. So just be encouraged. We need you exactly as you are with what you have. And thank you for listening to us talking about these really tough, terrible things that are going on, but also just be hopeful, be encouraged, because it's organizations like hers or mine and you who our eyes are open. We're seeing something, we're saying something, and we're saying, hey, let me help you. So just be encouraged with that.
All right, I've got 2 more things. First, let's thank these 3 people for sitting on our panel today. And second, Professor Benbow, would you close us in prayer?
God, we're grateful that you are a good God and you're a just God and you're a God that is bringing your kingdom to this earth. And God, we're thankful that you have and that you are. And we look forward to the day where your kingdom is here in its fullest because you have brought it. But God, you have made it clear that you have also called us to build your kingdom in the meantime. And if this isn't part of that, I don't know what is. And so, God, it's our prayer that we will be kingdom builders, that we will build upon the just and good kingdom you're bringing to this world. Help us, Lord, to celebrate justice and work alongside it when we see it. And help us, Lord, to have the courage and the awareness to fight against injustice when we see it, that we might be marked with you and with your work. We're grateful, Lord, for this opportunity we have to be exposed to something that is urgent and that matters and that have actual human lives tied to it. And we pray, Lord, that we'll do our part and that you'll forgive us, Lord, when we haven't. But you're good, and you've got a lot coming ahead, and we pray, Lord, that we'll be a part of it. Amen.
All right. Thank you, guys.
So the song says that mountains